Alright, hey, what's up, guys? Zach Rowe with LB Certified Fitness. So this is another video coming at you. This is a loose kind of sequel to my previous video on bioenergetics. It's a little bit different, and it's not like you need to watch that video, but there are some concepts that I went over in that video that I will be covering in this one as well. So let's just get into it. This video is going to be about RER, respiratory exchange rate, and the fat burning zone myth, which, because it's not a real thing, it is a thing, but not as people perceive it to be. Alright, so first off, I'm just going to explain respiratory exchange rate. So it is the difference between CO2 breathed out versus oxygen uptake. Essentially, for the average person, unless you're an elite athlete in a lab being tested on, it's nothing you'll ever be able to do, really, because you need a lot of very fancy material and whatnot to check those things. It's not something it's not a field test you can just do, it's not something simple like a formula, like a Carbonin formula, or like check your heart rate or whatever. So I'm gonna break it down and show you how you can do it yourself, essentially. Alright, so first I'm gonna go over different RERs. So right here is basically a scale. These numbers don't really matter against the average person, but as you can see, as this number goes up, so starting around 0.7 and going up to 1, this is essentially your intensity. So as this number goes up, your intensity goes up, okay? That's really all you have to know about the number. The specific number doesn't really mean anything because, again, you're never probably going to be able to do this test anyways. And then as you can see, as the intensity goes up, your percentage of calorie expenditure derived from carbs goes up. So this 0.71 is at complete rest, where you're just sitting on the couch not doing anything, and you would derive pretty much 0 carbohydrates for energy at rest, and almost 100% from fat. Okay, and as you can see, it's a converse kind of scale, where as you increase your carbohydrate expenditure, as you increase your intensity, your carbohydrate energy source increases, and this fat calories you get from fat decreases, conversely. So that's very interesting, right? So now we'll kind of get into the fat burning myth of fat burning zone. So that would essentially kind of be in this zone 1. This is like the fat burning zone, where you burn the most calories from fat. It's 65 to 75% of your heart rate max. If you're unfamiliar with your heart rate max, the very simple, easy way to do it is just do 220 minus your age. So I'm 23. I do 220 minus 23. That's 197 is my maximum heart rate. All right. It's not the best way to do it. Probably the easiest would be the Carbonin formula, which I brought up earlier, which takes into consideration your resting heart rate and all those kind of things. Because say you have like a 50-year-old guy, you have a 50-year-old sedentary guy and a 50-year-old physically active guy, those two people obviously aren't going to have the same heart rate max. The 50-year-old that exercises is going to have a lower resting heart rate, right? So if you want to get very much more specific, you can Google that Carbonin formula. It's pretty simple. You just need a couple different things, and you can figure it out. I won't go over it right now because it's pretty whatever. But if you're interested, leave a comment, and I could literally do the math with you right here on the board, and do the Carbonin formula. But nevertheless, 65 to 75% of your heart rate max. That's kind of what the fitness industry and a lot of people say is the fat burning zone. But if you take a look at the RER, really that zone 1 is from 0.8 to 0.9. This little section here. So as you can see, fat burning zone, a majority actually is in the 0.8, all right? So on that lower scale, maybe like 65% of your heart rate max, but then you get to like 50-50, and then when you get to 0.9, it's actually 2/3 of your calorie expenditure is from carbohydrates, all right? So right away, that doesn't make sense, right? When you're at complete rest is your fat burning zone. But as you know, when you're sitting on the couch, you're really not expending many calories at all. You are expending some, right? Your basal metabolic rate, just your internal organs doing what it needs to do to stay alive and breathing and whatnot, it still requires some calorie expenditure, right? But it's not nearly enough. You could to burn fat, most likely, because you're probably going to be eating substantially more food and calories than you will be your basal metabolic rate, unless you're extremely disciplined and not eating a ton of calories, which would be very challenging, just to be honest. So yeah, there's that. So that's that fat burning zone. And then zone 2 is, and so what the, actually back to zone 1, sorry. A better name for this is more like recovery zone, or your aerobic base training zone. Yeah, instead of your fat burning, because fat burning, like I said, would be at complete rest. And then your zone 2 is 80 to 85%. That's kind of getting to your anaerobic threshold, and that's going to be your like 95 to 100, where pretty much most of your energy expenditure. Let me check, make sure this is still recording. Yeah, we're good. Most of your calorie expenditure is going to be for carbs, because, referring back to the last video, is when you increase intensity, you have to use glycolysis to produce energy, because your oxidation of fat is just not quick enough to keep up with the intensity of exercise that you're doing, right? So you need to be using carbohydrates, going through glycolysis to make enough energy to sustain the work that you're doing, all right? And so this kind of like intensity is probably where you're going to be at, like if you're doing any kind of like continuous long endurance exercise. And then most kind of sports, say basketball, soccer, football, because it's more cyclical, like you're exploding and then coming down, exploding, coming down with the plays. You might come in and out of these zones, all right? But you're going to be burning a lot of carbohydrates for energy throughout that time, all right? And then zone 3 is 68 to 100% of your heart rate max, and actually goes above the 1 RER. But nevertheless, you're still spending pretty much 100% of your calories from carbohydrates, but you are not able to sustain that high heart rate zone for very long. It's just it's your aerobic, you're just going to be accumulating too much metabolic acidosis to sustain that for very long. If you train it really, really good, and you can sustain it for longer, many minutes, but most people aren't really going to be able to maintain that for very long. And that's going to be like just a full out sprint. You're not even, the like powerlifting and whatnot, you're not even going to be doing it for long enough to spike it that high, most likely. But like a lot of strongman events, like longer endurance ones, like for repetitions, compound movements for repetitions, loading events, pulling the big planes and whatnot, those are going to spike it and you're going to get extremely high. But you know, those events don't last long, maybe a minute max, you know. So yeah, that's all the information here on the board. So zone 1 right here, zone 2 right here, and zone 3 real tiny. You can only get there for so long, and I didn't even write it down, but yeah, let me double check. Alright, we're good. Still recording. So now I'm going to look at this from 2 different perspectives, from a general exerciser who's trying to lose weight, and from an athlete trying to enhance performance. So first we'll go from weight loss for the average person. there's this idea that you want to get in the fat burning zone, but we know from the law of thermodynamics that it's just calorie ins versus calorie outs. So just trying to burn fat in your exercise doesn't really make sense. You just want to expend the most calories you can. You're not going to be expending any calories here, right? Because your average person with excess body fat that's not exercising, they're probably just sitting around doing whatever all day. If that was the true fat burning zone, and that was the key to weight loss, there would be no fat people, right? Everyone would just lose weight just sitting there. So that's obviously not the case, right? So we want to be expending calories as high as possible. So this recovery or aerobic base zone is a very good place to be in, because you can do that quite often. It's not going to put a ton of strain on your body, and you can do that multiple days in a row. Starting off, it might be like 2 to 3 days, but you're gonna recover quickly, and your body's gonna adapt to it. And you could do that kind of exercise maybe 6 days a week. Really, you always want to try and give yourself one day rest. But your calories burned from fat your percentage of calories from fat is gonna decrease, but you're gonna be expending significantly more calories anyways. So your total calorie expenditure is going to be higher, and also your total fat burn is going to be higher because of the total amount of calories. So the percentage may be higher here, but your total calorie expenditure is higher with higher intensity exercise. And then if you really get into it and you want to go a little bit harder with your exercise, adding in interval training days where you go 80 to 85% of your heart rate max. Again, you're just going to be exercising a little bit harder, and therefore expending a little bit more calories. But that's not super necessary for the average gym. Right now, next to athletes, it's real important to know for athletic performance, referring back to my first video, bioenergetics, and the different substrates you're using for energy, and how long your duration of exercise is, and knowing how to fuel for those. So if you're a super high intensity athlete where you're going to be in these heart rate zones for long periods of times, which is most sports, any kind of Olympic lifting, powerlifting, short distance, mid distance, track and field events, football, basketball, soccer, you're going to be in these high intensities. And all those are slightly different, because some you just do one big quick explode, some it's like, you're kind of a jog and then you explode intermittently throughout. And then knowing kind of where your sport is at and where your heart rate's going to be at for most of it is how you should know how to fuel properly for your events. And then really mainly, and this is for a very small section of people, most athletic endeavors are really not in this 65-75% heart rate max. It's really for like super ultra endurance events like Ironmans, and like ultra marathons, where you're at that super low intensity just because it's so long and you're just trying to not just destroy your body, so you have to keep it at a pretty low intensity. But even then, say if you're like a 65 or like a 70, you're still like 50-50 split. So taking in a little bit of both, but mainly it's going to be carbohydrates for energy, because like we talked about last time, you can't oxidate fat fast enough to produce energy to sustain high levels of intensity. You're going to have to use aerobic glycolysis, so the breaking down of carbohydrates, glycogen, glucose, whatever it may be, different energy sources for sugars. You're going to be using those for energy. And then primarily the reason that athletes will be using zone 1, like I said, is recovery, right? Instead of using it like a fat burning zone, think of it as like recovery or aerobic base training. So recovery kind of throughout the week, like during the season or post-season, to get some kind of physical activity going and get recovery going in the muscles and the joints, because that increase in blood flow is going to increase blood flow to where it needs to be to get nutrients and whatnot in there to help recover quicker. And then also aerobic base training, like preseason, get that aerobic base to then be able to perform these higher intensity things and just be able to recover quicker, essentially. Because the better your aerobic base is when you go into those higher intensities, the when your heart rate's coming back down, you can recover down quicker and be ready to go to explode again. Say if you're doing like a football, basketball, soccer, that kind of sport, then someone that isn't as conditioned is deconditioned, you know. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Yeah, I think that's it. And this has been Zachro with LB Certified Fitness. Check out my websites for training information and whatnot. Check out my Instagram page. I have stuff on there, content like this on there. Check out my Performance Academy podcast with my friend Josh. YouTube page, I'll link that. I think that's it. So, peace.